Adobe is looking at buying Figma for $20 billion. And then Adobe also pre-announced by a couple hours their earnings. Daniel, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so I'm going to hit the earnings in about 15 seconds, and then let's talk about Figma. The earnings were really good, and no one cared because the Figma deal came out at the same time. And when you make a deal with some of the stats, and I'll talk about them in a minute, and I'm gonna play the bull here because I think you're going to help me play the bear a little bit, and we can come around. But the earnings were good. The company beat top and bottom. Their guidance, given the kind of overall guidance adjustments we've seen this quarter from a lot of companies, their guide was still pretty good. Still going to beat on the bottom line, maybe a slight pullback on the overall revenue expectation. Called out the headwinds, but still a ton of demand. I mean, this company is a company that enables digital, so it doesn't have a big physical presence requirement for it to gain more demand. In fact, but as things like e-commerce slow, that could affect it. But at the same time, as holidays roll in, that's a tailwind for a company like Adobe. So the fact that it came down 10% to pre-pandemic lows, I want to point that out. Almost as if the company has not grown, and it has. The record revenue this quarter for Adobe. Now, let's just talk about Figma, though. For those not familiar, I'm going to really overly simplify this, but if you're familiar with like visualization software like Dassault or 3D Excite that's used for creating products in a collaborative space, this is the collaborative whiteboard for creating a digital experience. So when you're designing your Netflix, this is go in and have an area that everyone can work and co-design at the same time and move things around and create a visual experience and a commerce or a customer journey in a shared environment. That's what Figma did. Figma's I'm going to kind of do some economics history here. Figma is a 10-year-old company, okay, or a little over 10, 2011 start. But it did not have its first dollar in revenue until 2017. So when you're tracking SaaS companies, the typical approach of doing that is how fast do you grow from your first dollar in revenue? Okay, so in 2017, first dollar. In 2021, 200 million. And in 2022, it's projecting to hit 400 million in revenue. As a little bit of a backdrop on what that means, the average SaaS, cloud scale SaaS company takes 4.5 years, I believe it is, to reach $10 million from their first dollar of revenue. Yeah. Okay. Only 8 companies of the 72 cloud scale SaaS companies that are currently that were measured in at least one study that I looked at got to 100 million in less than 5 years from revenue. Those are Slack, Square, Dropbox, Elastic, Hortonworks, and Pivotal. So it's actually 6. Sorry, not 8. Sorry, 6. I can count, but not this time. And Friday, on average, most companies take 10 years to 15 years to hit $100 million. And let's just be clear here. This company hit $400 million in 5 years. Why am I sharing this? Well, cloud economics are interesting. And a lot of times, even as these companies were hitting $100 million, they didn't make any money. This company is net operating profitable. So they're making money. They kept 90% margins, 150% net customer retention. One of the fastest, if not the fastest company to hit 200 million, if not 400 million. They're going after a $16.5 billion TAM, and they have almost zero cost of customer acquisition. And the reason I point all this out is rare companies are still rare. And so when you're an Adobe and you're looking at a market you want to go after, you have to consider, well, what would it cost us to build this? Well, XD was their product and it hadn't succeeded. They were de-investing in it. That's right. The only competitive product they have, and they don't use it. They're not selling it or promoting it. So this is an augmentation of their current revenue. It's not going to be a competitor. The question is, there's some antitrust stuff. I'll let you do that part. But in the end of the exercise, a company that's creating that kind of margin, this kind of growth, does it warrant a 50-time forward earnings? And a year ago, I think everyone would have just applauded and been like, this is great. But in this economy, it's really hard to get away with it. So I'll leave it at this. In this particular time, in this market, it's very hard to say that was a good decision for Adobe. It's very hard to say it. However, in 5 years, if the company continues to grow at this rate, they will look back and we will realize that once again, the crazy hive mind market pundits will have gotten this wrong and sent to you, and the leadership at Adobe got this right. And I think that's what we'll end up finding. But again, in this current market, there's no way this would be accepted or people are going to like it, hence the sell-off. But I don't necessarily think Adobe was wrong.
So I'm not gonna hit on excuse me, I'm not gonna hit on the earnings. I'm just gonna hit on the deal here.
Yeah,
It was interesting. I was thinking through this, and this absolute ridiculous 50x in this time frame. And Daniel, you kind of got me into Succession, and I was wondering, hey, which Waystar Royco deal is this more like? Is this like the Volter deal, or is this the Gojo deal? You know, and if you remember the way that Volter ended up, they essentially just went in and shut down the company because they lied about all the. So it's probably not going to end up like that, but maybe more like Gojo, where literally they came in and did that. But then again, when I look at Volter, it was this young company. People weren't using the old media, which is exactly what we're looking at here with Figma. Because I couldn't help but to look at the comments about it, and you had these really passionate Figma users that were almost like, I use Figma, but I hate Adobe, right? Kind of like Volter
Slack and Salesforce or
Waystar Royco or Instagram and Facebook. So that's kind of what it brought up with me. But if I get real here, like a real analyst, like I should be, top two concerns. Number one is antitrust, right? The current environment in the Department of Justice and the FTC with the crew that the Biden administration brought in, not only do they dislike huge companies buying smaller competitors, the agencies are actually actively investigating companies like Facebook for buying Instagram, over 5 years ago? So
it's like 15, I think.
That's not accurate, but I'll go along with it.
How long ago okay, go ahead.
It definitely happened after I started my company, but heck, Facebook didn't even go IPO 15 years ago. It went more like, I think, 11 years ago.
I'm just screwing around. It was a long time. Go ahead.
No, so coming into this environment, how on earth are they going to pull this off? And I kind of riffed on one of the first articles that came out from TechCrunch. Literally, the headline was Adobe is buying Figma for $20 billion, taking out one of its biggest rivals in digital design. So, issue number one. And issue number two, I think you talked about it, which was 50x forward ARR, $20 billion, one of the highest SaaS valuations I've seen, at least since the market's been down. And is this the best use of Adobe's capital? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, so 2012, so we were right in the middle. You were 5, I was 15. It was actually 10. So there we go. That's the exact number there. What do you say? It's the over-under. And Pat, I totally agree with you. By the way, highest valuation, I think the second highest ever SaaS deal, highest ever private deal, and definitely a multiple that's got. I can't wait to hear what David Sachs has to say about this one. That's going to be a good one on the other bestie pod. The second bestie pod.
No, I know, and I'm interested to hear what Logan Roy might say about the deal. But it starts with an F and it ends with an O. So
an off. It starts with an F.
Exactly. He's going to build it himself. So F off.